Awesome.
And I'm going to hand it over to Nick, and Amy.
Good morning, I'm Amy Greene. I'm part of e-learning, but I am also part of the Hatch planning team. And so I get the pleasure of hosting this session this morning. Nick Kuiper actually reached out to me at the beginning of last semester asking if e-learning was interested in working with a group of students in his class on a video project. And so the rest of this session, I'm going to turn over to Nick, and they'll give you some background on the project and what they were able to create. And then at the end of the session, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Russo, who's going to talk about if you're interested in future experiences with documenting what you did during the pandemic, how you can get involved in sharing your stories. So Nick Kuiper, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This project started out initially in our instructional design class, our TDMP 466 class. Nick Karlik was on a team that was really interested in approaching this subject after Amy pitched it to our class. So every semester we have a chance to meet with clients so they can pitch their ideas. And it really resonated with our students as being an opportunity for us to really engage with the Ferris community and kind of get some feedback about what the transition was like, how they were able to adapt and engage students, and then how students were able to overcome quite a few obstacles that we all, I'm sure, are knowledgeable about. So Nick Karlik and his team of Mimi Umwali and Noah, they combined their skill set and they went out around campus and they did some interviews. Before Nick Karlik is here as well, and he'd probably like to share a little bit about his experience. Before we do that, I would like to share our short documentary. It's about 8 minutes. And so hopefully we'll be able to play that nice and seamlessly. I did some testing. And so let me get ready to share that. And after about 8 minutes, we'll meet again and we'll talk a little bit more about the experience.
Our department prior to the switch supported about 20 to 25% of the faculty that used online primarily for their hybrid or fully online classes.
When Ferris announced that they were going to go fully online, I was home and received the word on the computer, an email.
Our school shut down that Friday, and then they told us that we weren't going to return for the next 2 weeks. And then after that, we never came back.
I was at my brother's place over in Grand Rapids during the time of the switch, or right after it had happened, because we were told we were supposed to leave the dorms shortly after the whole scare kind of reached its peak.
Being a student and switching to online class was a very different experience because I was in 2 production-based classes and then another class that was based in lab. And so I pretty much only had 1 lecture class. And so switching from being in person, like hands-on learning, stuff like that, was very difficult and very different. We ended up having to drop certain projects.
When we moved fully online, I was working, doing staff training and development. I really had to refocus my efforts from in-person trainings, which happened in this room right here, to virtual trainings. Almost within a week, I had to transition.
My biggest struggle switching to online during the pandemic was motivation. I'm a big procrastinator, so having to do certain projects by certain times without having like the rigid time constraints of in-person classes really drew me back.
I would say the internet, because like we had internet, but I mean the internet wasn't as good. So in the beginning, I kept cutting in and out of classes, or sometimes my Wi-Fi just didn't work. So it just kicked me out of the Zoom call. It also happened to my little brother, but I think it happened mostly because me and him were both using it at the same time. We were both doing Zoom calls.
For me, like the biggest thing was like not having a job. So like, cause I come from a low income family, like we didn't have as much as like the other families, and it was kind of hard, like just to manage like our money wisely, cause we also like obviously have bills. So it's like you have to find ways to adapt. Like, oh, like if you usually spend $100 on groceries, you have to spend less now. You have to adapt to like a new lifestyle.
The job situation right after we got kicked out of the dorms didn't really pan out. I just kind of stayed unemployed and really didn't have much to do for money. I was living off of what my brother was kindly giving me when it came to food, shelter, toiletries, all the basic needs that most people need. He just kind of provided. He took me in like his own kid and just took care of me. So I didn't really get much figured out in that way.
Over the summer, I was meant to take 2 summer classes in person, and they were lab-based classes, and so we weren't able to do them online. And so I ended up having to drop them and find 2 online classes to be able to take. And right in the middle of those classes, because they're partial semester, they were overlapped by a week, and that week I actually had to go to the hospital for 10 days. Not COVID related at all, like it was personal health issues. I ended up staying in the hospital, having multiple surgeries, and I think COVID really affected how that happened, because when you're in the hospital, you have to wear your face mask at all times unless you're in your own personal room. You gotta have a COVID test for every surgery, and I had surgery 5 days apart and ended up having to have 2 COVID tests for that, even though they were back to back. They're like, nope, too much time between, so you have to get tested again. And it was a struggle, like it was a very painful experience. Do not recommend. But the professors, they were really nice about it, really kind, like they helped me through. But with it being an online class, it was the very beginning of the online class. Like I went to the hospital, and the next day the class was supposed to start. And I think that set me back for that class. Like I felt like I couldn't get caught up, and like once I did get caught up, I couldn't focus on it as much.
Probably my biggest concerns when we went to fully online had to do with how to replicate everything that would happen in class. My program's a little different. It's off campus, and my average student is 37. They're 37, married, 2.5 kids, working 55 hours a week. So my students bring a lot to the classroom, and I tried to figure out how I can still get that kind of input.
When the switch became apparent, we started immediately putting out resources to the general 100% of the faculty and trying to make sure that everybody had all the different pieces they needed.
For the most part, I knew a lot of the different tools. I just wasn't using them on a regular basis because I was doing most of my training in person. So I had to see what I had coming up for the rest of the semester, and then decide, okay, is this something that I'm able to do live virtually, or is it something that I need to move to an on-demand type format online? It was a big change for a lot of the people, having the interaction. Fortunately, we had Zoom, so it made it a lot easier for me to continue to do breakout sessions where I could put 2 or 3 people together in order for them to collaborate, but it was just something new and different. People weren't familiar with it.
So I spent a large amount of time looking at putting together that kind of keep learning set of resources and trying to find resources that would help students on campus be able to, do the same types of things and get the same access that they had prior. So reaching out to people, collecting resources, connecting people, and then putting that out to faculty so faculty could then share with their students.
Most of the classes that I teach are face-to-face. So what I had to go through to do classes fully online, not being real good with technology, what I ended up doing is doing videos and then making YouTube videos out of them and then putting them into Canvas. What I would have liked to have been able to do a little different, I guess, is I still am not real good about doing the videos and making them YouTube and then embedding them. So I've had to have a lot of help. So I thought maybe it was a little more of a passing phase that we were going through, and I didn't learn as quickly as I probably should have.
In order to keep up with the pandemic and with classes during the switch, I had to essentially rearrange my entire setup for my computer. I had to make sure that there was some sort of Ethernet wired connection to my computer at all times, which was something I didn't need to worry about in the dorms because they had pretty reliable Wi-Fi. I had to switch my regular gaming TV into a monitor to give me the ability to have two screens, because that was one of the things we have and we're used to in the computer labs on campus. I also had to readjust my sleep schedule because now that there wasn't really any place to go or thing to do at a particular time, it just kind of turned into a nebulous schedule of get it done at some point and hopefully it gets done before the due date.
When I recognized that someone was struggling, I had to remember to pause, to kind of just take a break, not try to just rush through things online, and focus on what the need was at that moment. Because when somebody's stuck on something where they can't get past something, they're not going to be able to continue learning unless you stop and take care of the need that they have at that one moment.
COVID-19 has taught me that everything we do as a society, we need to do as a society, and we need to work together to get through it. When you don't wear a mask, it affects everyone around you. So it's not only your decision, it should be their decision as well. Are they okay with you not wearing a mask? It's not only up to you to not wear it. You should always care for those around you, even if they're complete strangers.
All right. I'd like to take just a second to let Nick kind of talk about the process and talk about some of the roadblocks that he faced with this documentary, especially as it relates to the university shutdown midway through our project.
Yeah, so one of, I would say, the major roadblocks we came across when the campus shut down was being able to get the equipment we needed, because I had 2 cameras we were using, and then we were just using like the camera mics, and then I had like a mic to plug into my camera. So that was kind of tough to record audio with those mics. It also was hard getting people to want to interview because nobody wanted to like leave their house after we shut down. So I would say those were like 2 of the main struggles, and then also finding B-roll to support the content we shot in the interviews.
Yeah, and as part of this project, there's a lot of troubleshooting. There's a lot of things that go into trying to work around just simple scheduling and simple technology issues, and then you introduce basically a lockdown for students. It becomes really tough because they weren't even able to check out equipment through our media supply, and so that part of learning, I think, is something that all of us did in that first semester, and even in the second semester. What we're doing currently is troubleshooting and trying to figure out ways that we're able to present students with opportunities for engagement. And one of the things I found, and I'm actually producing a documentary to kind of go a little bit further into the university's response to the pandemic. I've had a chance to interview a few people in this room, actually, just recently. Steve Huntersmark, trying to see other people. But there's a few things that maybe you've seen in the classroom that you've experienced and that they've actually indicated as being an area where they've engaged and kind of created some new opportunities. One of those is through internships. A lot of changes happen during internships that I'm finding that were very difficult for students, because no longer were some of those students able to go to internships. And one of the things I noticed quite heavily that each person was mentioning was the adaptation of clacks to provide a much richer experience for students with soft skills, to try to expand their soft skills. when they're not on internship, being able to really focus in on those things are things that I think employers are very much going to appreciate. And so hopefully, I think Mickey Albright's in here. I might want to reach out to you for an interview in the future about that, because that's what many people that I've interviewed so far have indicated. Another thing is, I feel from the interviews that I've been doing and interviews that Nick and his group did, while Zoom is a new kind of phenomenon, I mean, Zoom existed, but the idea of being able to Zoom at any time opens up a lot of opportunities. And I think one of those opportunities that many of you have probably experienced, some of you may not have, depending on if you're in person or not, is many faculty members are indicating that Zoom is providing a much richer opportunity for students who are quiet. Those students who are not very likely to be very, very vocal inside the classroom. Having that opportunity within a chat function has really opened up a lot of rich opportunities for them to communicate with each other and with their faculty members. And so, there's been some discussion, especially in the interviews I'm doing, there's been some discussion about whether or not you require your students to have their cameras on. Most of the people are really indicating that because we're letting the students into our home, but the students are also at homes where maybe they don't feel very comfortable to turn on their cameras. That, many faculties I'm interviewing are saying, well, I give them the opportunity to decide, right? And maybe chat is a good function for that, even though it may be a little bit hard to manage while you're also delivering lecture. But really, I think, and maybe Nick, you can talk about this because you're a student currently on internship. You're a student who had to manage education through a pandemic. But I think there was really a sense of trying to be creative with how you're approaching certain situations, and then also managing expectations and understanding that you shouldn't have to do everything. And as a student, we shouldn't expect every student to be able to manage all of these things, right? Because not only did many students lose their socialization mechanism, they lost their jobs, they lost their place of where they lived. And so I really appreciate from the interviews I've gotten so far that faculty, as all of us, have to be empathic, right? We have to, empathy is a core tenet of what we do as professors and teachers and staff, et cetera. And I really love hearing about those moments and how caring professors have been. But Nick, can I kind of talk about how the pandemic influenced video production for you and other things?
Yeah. So it was nice that we had my senior class with Glenn, because that also kept us making content. And then on top of this, I was producing this. So we were shooting interviews still, even though it was tougher with the shutdown. But shooting the interviews was, I think the best part was learning what people went through when the first pandemic came, or the first wave, and just seeing, or like listening to their stories and seeing what they went through. It just really opened my eyes that like I wasn't the only one that had to go through this. Like everyone had to go through this. Everyone has their own stories, and it's, I think, really good for people to see that people were going through tough times. So it's going to help other people who went through tough times, and it's okay, because nobody was able to, like, nobody has done this. So like we're all in the same boat, and I think that is a great learning experience on its own. So it was just nice to be a part of those stories and creating them.
Nice. I guess we've got about 10 minutes left. I wonder if anybody had any questions or any comments or thoughts about student experience, faculty experience. And is anybody willing to sit for another interview?
Tracy, I'll turn it over to you for just a second if you want to explain. So as Nick said, he's actually working on another documentary in addition to this one. The students did an incredible job with this. What Nick Karlik didn't say was that many of them were quarantined throughout the process. And so they had a schedule and they had interviews lined up and then they couldn't do them. And so I just can't give enough kudos to the students in Nick Kuiper's class, Nick Karlik being one of them, because they really did, to pull together the little documentary that you just saw with all the obstacles that they had was really incredible. So after the semester ended, Nick Kuiper reached out and said that he wanted to continue the project. And so we're looking for two different things. One is interviews with Nick, or if you have students that you know experienced either overcame huge obstacles or just are inspirations. Like Nick Karlik said, sometimes the best thing for us all is to have that empathy and go, oh, it wasn't just me. I'm not the only one struggling. And so whether you want to share your story or you have a student that you would like him to reach out to, and then I'll turn it over to Tracy to talk to you about what she's working on with Academic Senate.
Thanks, Amy. I am going to put a link into the chat to everyone. And what it is just a very short survey. Excuse any typos, because when we were trying to figure out how to efficiently capture everybody's stories, trying to find a time slot that we could do this, as you can imagine from everything going on today, was very challenging. So thankfully, Nick and Amy agreed to share just a little bit at the end of this presentation. And the project that we're working on is really just kind of creating that short, connecting faculty with each other around what teaching strategies did you use following that shift to remote, so that we can, again, have a small collection of videos where you can look and see who did what worked, who has a good idea that maybe I could pull from what they did, maybe I could use that in my class, who had a similar problem, like in the video documentary, the discussions on, they were used to, for example, the adult students bringing so much of what they had from the workforce into the classroom. What did you do to replicate that? Each one of you has at least one, if not more, strategies, something you did, something unique to your experience that's of value to share with others. And so we're just looking to put together, again, just a small collection of these stories. And the way we're going to do this is just hold short interview sections, like 15 minutes. So we're really only asking for 10 to 15 minutes of your time, where I'll have the time set up and you'll log on to Zoom for our warm, friendly, engaging experience here. But in that setting, just as if we were on campus in a small group, share your story in just 1 to 2 minutes, just that sound bite of what is it that you did and how did it work? So again, kind of a short, sweet chunk of your time, but if everybody just, or not necessarily everybody, but if a lot of people contribute just that short chunk of time, we will have a very large collection of excellent teaching strategies to share with others. So that's how the project, it'll be shared, that along with, there's a whole lot of other pieces that will be shared, but in the March Academic Senate meeting, where we'll be discussing ways that successfully help Ferris and the Ferris faculty transition in the shift, and other things that we could pull from that experience, taking them forward into this next iteration of our teaching experiences. So with that, I'll just open it up for questions. And I see Angie put a nice comment in the chat, and I think this is when she's bringing up empathy, that is a huge part of what's going forward and what's out there in the research, that it is that empathetic teaching, that trauma-informed teaching, because we're not over this. this came up in a discussion yesterday, I think it was, with Allison, actually Burnoff, and a couple, and Julie Rowan and Todd from the Faculty Center, when we were just talking about language. Is it post-pandemic? Is it during pandemic? What language do we even use? So again, that's why if you can share your story of those things that you did that helped you stay engaged in teaching, your students stay engaged, we think that will help us pull out the best and go forward more, as positively and as creatively and innovatively as we can. Because we know within this whole group, each one of you is doing cool stuff. I hear cool stories in my position all the time. So if we can just figure out how to share them and, again, just keep supporting each other with this work.
Yeah, Nick, the question from Angie, I don't know if you read it or not, was talking about empathy and the first round and how that plays out moving forward. And this was from Angie Bai. She posted it in chat. It was that there was an assumption that people recover at different paces, and how empathy will kind of continue on. So I know that, like, I've seen some faculty, like, after they've gotten their shots and stuff like that, they're like, okay, it's done now. And or if there's going to be kind of that continuation of understanding as people kind of reintegrate into normal. And so is there kind of plans for a longitudinal documentary on this and kind of include those timestamps? So this is, like, I think a lot of the video that you captured was in the middle of it, which is an incredibly valuable snapshot. But then how does that go going forward?
Yeah, and I agree with Angie as well. Here's the thing that I think, and is gleaned from the interviews Nick did and I did, is that the idea that we're going to go back to normal, I don't think there's a normal after this. I think there is a transition into an understanding that the way we've done things for 50, 60 years is maybe not going to be the way we do it in the future, right? I mean, why do we need snow days when we can do Zoom, right? Sorry to mention it, but I mean, it's that opportunity, right? But also understanding that there's this whole wealth of technology that we can now utilize at any time that was already there, but now we've had to learn how to use it, and now we have it. And so I think in terms of empathy, on the other side of that is I think there needs to be quite a bit of research and documentation about the way we can use that more fully in the classroom and outside. But yes, Tracy does mention we do need a break, right? And from a faculty's perspective, it's a lot of work. There's a lot that goes into it. And I do mixed, I actually do split labs, right? So I used to teach 14 students in a room. Now I'm teaching 7 students in a room, but I'm teaching the content twice each week. So, that's more work, but it doesn't matter. I mean, that's the way we need to do it. But every student I have talked to, and I was a co-advisor of an RSO, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And I can tell you that, all of these events and stuff like that students are, we want them to attend all these Zoom sessions. I can tell you that Zoom is the last thing they want to do when they're doing it all day. And so anything we can do to make it more engaging and more exciting, I think is a great tool. And, I can say from a technology standpoint, I really love Canvas Studio. Instead of having to put all the videos on YouTube, now you can use Studio and you can record everything right into Canvas and then embed it really easily. So.
There was a question in chat from Dave. Are these 2 separate projects? The one that Tracy was talking about and the one that Nick's been talking about?
Amy and I both typed at the same time, which cracks me up because yes, they're separate but related. So Nick's documentary is an ongoing project where, he's really looking at capturing the more, I guess, holistic story of the different experiences from both students and faculty. The project that I'm working on is specifically, it was a requested project for Academic Senate as part of, again, documenting those teaching strategies that people at Ferris have been using successfully so that we can share these teaching strategies with each other. They will feed into each other, and there might be times, I know Nick has got some stuff that we are going to follow up with, and if you share a teaching strategy with us, we might say, hey, can you share this other part of the story with Nick's group? But they are separate. I'm asking for just, again, about 10, 15 minutes of your time in the next week or so. I'll put the link to the Google form again, or you can just, again, email me directly and I'll be setting up some times. So Susan had put in there about whether we need to be on campus or remotely, and it's both and. So I will have times where we will be just recording the Zoom session like this, and I will have a few times where we will be on campus for people who would prefer to be on campus. And keep in mind, on campus, we will be following all the distancing strategies and everything else for that. So
yeah, I think for both of these projects, at least I don't want to mean to speak for you, Tracy, but kind of having this repository of information from things you're doing can inform, 20 years from now can inform instructors. And that's, at least from my perspective, documenting new ideas, documenting things like technology limitations of broadband for students who are in rural areas. Those are all things that really need to be documented so that we can grow and move on from an education sphere to provide better access to our students.
Deja in the chat just said almost the exact same thing, that she would be willing to provide her experience and emphasizing the need for rural broadband development, that not only did our students have some extreme challenges. I know in e-learning, we put together a repository. One of our student assistants was trying to find different free Wi-Fi spots for students. And the same is true for faculty and staff as well. We think about our students because we're so student focused at Ferris, but it's not, we heard it from faculty as well. And it's not even just having the broadband accessibility, but we had faculty who were very, very good at teaching what they taught in their classrooms and really struggled even with using email. And so to now have to teach everything online when you're way behind the curve in terms of technology, there are some incredible stories. And I think Andrew said that he'd be willing to share some of his experience as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good kind of side stories. What IT was doing to deliver laptops and mobile Wi-Fi to students. There was an afternoon where I dropped off a laptop to a faculty member while we were in a parking lot. And the formal process was here because her laptop broke. And she's like, I'm dead in the water without this. And she goes, you guys got it to me in 45 minutes. How, what, wow. So kind of on that note, we're just about out of time, and we will have, let's see if I can paste the proper link here in chat. So this will be the link to the session for the kind of the, I guess, opening ceremonies, the welcome to, that starts at 9 o'clock. So we'll have an opportunity to go refresh coffee and avoid Zoom fatigue, I think is the formal work. But I would say thanks for coming, and thank you for our presenters.
Thank you, Nick and Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you, everyone.